That's not a moment of silence. Okay, hi. Welcome. This is Dallas Winston from Bloody Elbow. I'm in the midst of a technological catastrophe and I'm all scatterbrained. But since I just bitched about it for a half hour to these guys before the show, we're just going to pass by all that and get started. Today, I'm proud to be joined by UFC middleweight Josh Samman. Josh,
Hey
how are
guys,
you?
how you doing? I'm doing well.
Good, good. Thanks for coming on. Hopefully, you can behave yourself this time, not be
I'll
so
try.
unruly.
I'll try my
Um,
hardest.
And as usual, Zane Simon is with me today, and these are going to be the guys that are going to tell
Yo.
us what's going on with the card. Zane, how are you? I was going to throw it your way.
Oh, okay, whatever. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Just trying to cope with all with the double header card thing, and trying to find out who everybody is and who they're fighting and why, and
There's a lot of
the
them coming
greater
up.
mysteries to life.
Whoa, that's a lot.
I
That's
know.
a lot to process right now. Do you got a little spackling project going behind your head on the wall there?
I'm painting my
Or is that your hair gel that
I'm painting my house, and so that was the test sample of the new. So.
even though the color doesn't match, kind of remind me of Coming to America, the Soul Glow thing when they all sat against the wall and you with me there? You guys are too young for that?
Yeah, no, I got it. Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, will you
Yeah.
sing that for me? Let your soul glow. This will be your
Next
moment,
one.
Josh.
Yeah, the next time we
Next
do it,
time.
yeah,
All right, you got to
remind me.
rehearse it a
Yeah,
little bit. All right,
remind me.
so because of my computer issues and just general inadequacies as a human being, we're going to be looking towards these two gentlemen joining me today for any information that would be thoughtful or relevant, because it sure as hell isn't going to be coming from me. So we're just going to buzz through the card here. There are, of course, two cards on Saturday. We're just going to do one show for the Swanson versus Stevens / Texas card, and then Zane and I and maybe somebody else will bring you that other one sometime in the future. So let's start with the first one. This one is UFC Fight Pass, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Anthony Hamilton versus Alexei Olenik, and I actually had to. This is the only thing I double checked that this is the same Alexei Olenik that's been around forever. So,
Is
Zane,
it not Olenik? I always pronounce it Olenik, but maybe it's
bro,
Olenik.
I don't know why we're even going to discuss how to pronounce something on this show because you can. The rule of thumb is do not pronounce it like I or anyone else does. So,
All
or at
right.
least me and Nate. So everyone make up their own on that. But start us off on this one, Zane. What are you thinking?
All right. So Olenik, yeah, he's been around for a long time. He was in Bellator briefly, not terribly successfully, but he's a guy who's been kind of kicking around on the European scene and just in general forever. Really very solid light heavyweight and capable at heavyweight. And I don't know. I mean, Hamilton's a weird fight because Hamilton's way bigger than him. Like, way, 6 inches. We're talking, like, 30 pounds bigger. But Oleinik's a much more technical fighter. He's got a little pop in his hands. He's not a great striker. And so this will really end up being about whether or not Hamilton can kind of impose his size on him and wear him down for a couple rounds. And then maybe unload with a head kick or, a knockout punch or something like that in the third. But honestly, I haven't seen, even, considering he did that to Smiliano Rama, I haven't seen enough from Hamilton to suggest that he could do that against a fighter as good as Olenek. So I would say that Olenek's probably going to take him down and sub him.
And to me, I was going to submission would be Oleinek's best course of action. Do you foresee a problem with him taking Hamilton down, especially due to the size deficit?
Uh, I don't know about taking Hamilton down as much as I might see a problem with him keeping Hamilton down if Hamilton can scramble a bit. I mean, Oleinek's a much more polished technical wrestler, so I don't see I mean, he's got a variety of shots and trips and drags that he can go to get Hamilton to the ground. And I don't see anything from Hamilton that says he's got the technical mastery to stuff shots over and over again. But that's what I say. I mean, the size difference is a big thing. If Hamilton can show that he can really use his size well and outmuscle Olenek in the clinch, and when they're body to body against the cage, then Hamilton could really hurt Olenek because Olenek's not a great striker at all. But I don't think that's gonna happen, quite frankly.
Mr. Saman, take us away.
I gotta disagree. I think that I think size is gonna win on this one. I mean, I'm just looking at Olenik stats right here. It says that at least for his, when he was signed to the UFC, and somebody put him on a scale, he weighed in at 228. And when I'm explaining weight classes to people who don't really know about MMA, and I explain that the heavyweight weight class is, there's a 60-pound discrepancy there, I make sure to explain that most of the guys who are weighing about 230, even up to 240, will cut down to 205. Those are real big guys. Sometimes I weigh as much as 228. As much as this guy weighs right here, Olenik, I walk around after a heavy night of eating and drinking, I could be 230 pounds, and I'm not fighting Anthony Hamilton at 262. So I don't know anything about Anthony Hamilton. I can only assume that he's an able-bodied and pretty capable heavyweight. If the UFC signed him, I'd hope so anyway. And there's weight classes for a reason. So I think in a big weight discrepancy like this, is a big weight difference that we're going to have to go with. I'd put my money on Anthony Hamilton.
I don't know. Assuming that UFC heavyweights are able-bodied is a pretty big.
It's a bold statement.
I assume they're all in shape and they can fight for 15 minutes tirelessly.
I didn't say that much, but I mean, it looks like just looking at Olenik's record, it looks like there's some holes in his games and in his game, and this guy, I mean, he's got over 60 pro fights. He's got some mileage, so a lot of times the younger guy will win anyway. So he's got youth, he's got size. I think he'll have what it takes to beat Olenik on Saturday.
All right, so that's the lone scrap to start us off on UFC Fight Pass, and we'll move on to the 4-fight preliminary card on Fox Sports 1. Up first, Ray Borg versus Shane Howell. I do, with clarity, recall the name Ray Borg because I was not just impressed, but almost floored by his debut. I thought it was a stellar first showing in the UFC. Josh, go ahead and go first on this one. What are you thinking?
This is really the only other fight on the card that I, don't know one of the guys personally or not familiar with, with both of them at least. Just looking at their stats right here, it looks like Ray Borg is, has a little bit of a more impressive pedigree. He's 6-1. The other guy doesn't have Shane Howell does not have a really impressive record. That's not always indicative of how good they are, as you guys know. But this is just a toss-up, and I'm just saying Ray Borg because I gotta agree with you and hopefully you won't be mean to me later on halfway through the show.
How dare you? How dare you? Zane, go ahead, and if either of you guys has it, what is Shane Howell's record?
13-7.
Yeah.
What do you think, Zane?
One of the less than impressive records for a UFC fighter, for sure.
I don't know about banking on Dallas's knowledge today. He's already kind of self-avowed that he's taking himself out of the...
Listen,
move along. Moving the show along.
Okay.
Stay on topic here, boys.
All right. Anyway, yeah, I mean, Borg is the big prospect here. His fight with Dustin Ortiz was really good for a guy who had 6 pro fights leading up to that. Dustin Ortiz is a pretty solid vet. I mean, he's kind of a top 10 gatekeeper for flyweight right now. And Borg came in and, it was a split decision, I think. I mean, he lost, but it was a narrow loss. And Howell is one of those guys. He's been on a big run. I mean, saying he's 13-7 is to also say that he's 10-2 since 2009. So
nice.
I mean, there's a big discrepancy there between saying that his record's obviously changed a lot. And part of that is I think he's probably dropped a lot in weight. That happens to a lot of the guys who've been on the flyweight circuit for a while. A lot of them started off like lightweight or featherweight, and only recently have been able to drop down because there's been more flyweights out there for them to fight. But honestly, Howell's one of those guys who I get the feeling like he looks like he works really hard, trains really hard, and fights with a lot of heart, but maybe doesn't have all the natural talents in the world, all the natural gifts. Isn't the fastest, isn't the strongest. Guy. And his game's really at what I've seen, there's not a lot of film out there, but what I've seen is really disconnected. Like, he's in striking mode, or he's in grappling mode, or he's shooting a takedown. He doesn't transition well between them. Like, everything has to be served up to him, and Borg is definitely looks like he's really fast, really strong, really great talent for the division, so I expect this to be kind of a showcase win for Borg.
Hey, Zane, 2 questions for you. Or really, I guess I'm looking for comments on 2 of my observations. I respect that you called Ortiz a top 10 gatekeeper because I think he's almost criminally, if not substantially, underrated at this point. Agree or disagree?
I don't know if he's underrated. Well, I mean, it's like saying the whole flyweight division's underrated outside of 5 fighters. I mean, people just don't know a lot about that division right now. So I don't get the feeling he's underrated just so much as the division itself is kind of overlooked. But I mean, if people are underrating him after his recent performance, or after his fight against Moraga, then I mean, he's already shown that he can take out somebody who at least briefly was thought to be top 5 or top 10 in his division.
I think he's top 10 level, but just doesn't get anywhere near that recognition is all.
Yeah, I mean he's a guy his wrestling's great, his top control is great, his control in general is great, and his boxing is solid, and he works well within his skills. He does what he has with or does what he can with the tools that he has, and he's a pretty great athlete to go with it. So I mean, can't ask a lot more.
And as I said, I was floored by Ray Borg's debut. Was that just me, or were you really impressed by that?
Yeah,
as well?
it was immensely impressive. I mean,
Who did he beat?
Oh, go ahead.
Who did he beat? Oh, who did Borg beat?
He took on Dustin Ortiz, and lost a split decision.
But looked really, really good.
Yeah.
Sick transitions, looked solid all the way around, really, really good instincts.
Well, and he's only like 20 or 21. I mean, the guy is really young.
Yeah.
I think they said he was the 3rd or 4th youngest in the UFC at the time,
Yeah.
but either way, I mean, super, super young. All right, so let's move on to... I'm sorry, do you have something else you wanted to add?
No.
Moving on to the next one, Andy Enns versus Marcelo Guaris. Josh Samman.
Andy's a guy, who I've been watching for a little bit. We tried out for the same season for season 17, and for those who don't remember, Andy Enns took Uriah Hall to the decision in the first fight of that tournament, and Uriah actually broke Andy's arm with a high kick sometime in the first round. And Andy continued to fight and even gained some steam towards later in the fight. He went and won a few on the circuit after the UFC let him go after that Ultimate Fighter tryout. He got re-signed. He's fought Clint Hester most recently. Had a really good showing against Clint. That was an exciting fight. I think he actually got dropped a few times, got back up, hit Clint with some heavy shots, and ended up losing the fight, but did well because of it. Against a guy who I think will be 4-0 in the UFC by the time Saturday night comes. So I don't know a whole lot about Marcelo. I think this is a fight that could potentially maybe I fight one of the winners of. Maybe if not one of these guys, then maybe one of the other middleweights on the card if they win. So I'm definitely watching these fights pretty closely. But I got to say that I think Andy will win this one. Just from lack of knowing too much about Marcelo. I have been pretty impressed with Andy. I think he's got some really tough matchups over the last couple of years and still done well. I warmed up with him a little bit even before the first fight. He felt nice and strong. He's big and tall, and I'm going to go with Andy on this one.
Yeah, a lot of heart on that dude for sure.
Absolutely.
Zane Simon, what do you think?
Well, it sucks because now, I know that Josh knows these people. Now I'm like, nah, he's not gonna win. And then,
Go ahead.
your friend.
No. Listen, the only one you can't talk shit about is Clint. Everybody else is free game.
Okay. Well, I'll try to stick to that. But Enns, I mean, I don't know. I was impressed watching his footage on the regional circuit when he was fighting up in Alaska, and he's got a really solid top game and a really good, aggressive base when he gets on top of somebody.
Yeah.
But the fight with Hester kind of showed that he doesn't have a transitional game at all. His striking's pretty mechanical, and he doesn't have the kind of takedown game that ensures he's going to get on top of people. Yeah. So unless his opponent's giving up takedowns to him pretty easily, I worry that he just has to sit on the outside and eat shots, waiting for opportunities. And Guimarães is kind of a grinder. I mean, he's not the most fun fighter to watch, but he's good at getting in and pressing guys against the fence and wearing them down and, taking them down and just kind of controlling the fight. And I haven't seen anything out of Enns that suggests yet that that's really something he's capable of doing. So I kind of have to take Guimarães here.
Cool.
Question to both you guys: isn't Andy a fairly credentialed grappler in the gi?
I don't know about.
He trains at Gracie Baja. I remember saying that. I don't know how. To be honest, I mean, I've never been to Alaska, and I'm not really active on the BJJ circuit. I don't know stiff the competition is up there. So even if he was accomplished in the in that lone state, I'm not sure how much it would mean. But I don't keep up with the gi stuff, so I wouldn't know.
All right,
And,
and go ahead, Zane. Go.
Guaris on that count too is a jungle fight champion, and I mean he's a guy who came up through a pretty rock solid regional circuit.
Yeah, those are going to be tough fights. All those fights are going to be tough fights.
Yeah, and so I just I don't know that I would put a lot of stock in Ends being a better grappler.
There was a decent amount. I don't know if I want to say hype, but I mean when Guaris was signed, there were some people interested in thinking that he could make some waves. Kind of a quick tangent question. A couple years ago, I don't know what it's like now, but the more pro fighters or camps or coaches or trainers I talked to, I was shocked at how many of them promoted or did still train in the gi. Josh, what are your thoughts on that? And from your experience, do you still see a lot of UFC level or top level guys training in the gi?
We don't train in the gi, and my one of my coaches, Sensei Daniel Valverde, is a judo black belt and world champion, and so you would think even him of all people would emphasize the gi, and he doesn't like it much, so we don't do it much, and I'm happy because of it. I've had previous jiu-jitsu instructors who really emphasize that the gi work and saying that it's going to transfer over to my MMA game, etc. And I never really saw the results. I didn't put a whole lot of time into it. So I can't say I tried too hard at the gi stuff. I've never done a grappling competition, and I still think that my grappling is fairly competent just from the no gi experience. So I can't say that the gi is necessary. No.
Yeah, I got you. I always thought that was a little bit odd. I want to say one of the advantages that people were selling was that it made you a lot more technical because gi grappling, there's a few more steps involved. But to me, it was weird because if you make that your foundation, you're going to have to cut or modify a lot of those steps anyways for
exactly.
a no-gi atmosphere. So I always thought that was just a little bit odd.
And that's the modification that you want to kind of try to avoid in MMA training for me anyway. I mean, even when I'm doing no-gi BJJ training, I'm encouraging my training partners for us to punch each other and make it as much like MMA as possible, because then your comfort level is going to rise while you're doing MMA in the cage. We're not doing grappling competitions. We're not wearing a gi. So might as well try to simulate the the situation of the fight as much as possible.
Right, I gotcha. All right, next up, Johnny Bedford versus Cody Gibson. Zane, take her away.
Well, I feel this is a little unfair to Johnny Bedford, but I feel like, at least in my mind, he's kind of gotten a bad rap, or not a bad rap, but a rap as a guy who is good at beating up much smaller fighters. And when he's faced with somebody a lot smaller than him that he can really push around and bully, he just tears them to pieces. I mean, his performance against Luis Gaudino and let's see, I'm trying to think of who was the other one. Marcos Vinicius were both pretty, strongly one-sided in his favor. He was able to just push him around and beat on him and really look dominant. But when he fights somebody who's as big as him or who is as tough as him, he has a lot more trouble with that. And I mean, Brian Caraway really kind of, even striking, and Brian Caraway is not exactly a striking savant, really was able to dictate range and dictate the fight just because Bedford couldn't push him around. And Gibson is a real big, strong bantamweight with a solid wrestling background and a lot of good transition and scrambling offense. So, honestly, I think this is Gibson's fight to lose.
Josh Samman.
I'm going to go with Johnny Bedford just for the sake of being contrary and picking something else besides Zane. I think Bedford is the more familiar fighter. He's definitely going to be a little bit more experienced. I don't know a whole lot about Cody Gibson. I'm sitting here switching back and forth between screens trying to get a little bit more info on him now. But in situations like this, I kind of just go with the guy I know more, and that's going to be Johnny Bedford.
In Bedford, I don't disagree with anything Zane said. I do think that Bedford, talented grappler, decent submissions, but I do think he thrives by just being a real tough, gritty, not necessarily strong physically, a little bit of that, but kind of just being able to overwhelm his opponent with pressure. I think Caraway's wrestling was the reason he was unable to do that there. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to this one. And Josh Samman, they're throwing out the controversial contrarian Barb versus Zane. All right, up next, this is the I guess you'd call it a headliner for the Fox Sports 1 prelims. Carlos Diego Ferreira, probably Ferreira, versus Colton Smith. Zane, your turn.
All right. I hope Carlos Ferreira wins this, honestly, because Colton Smith is not a joy to watch fight. He's kind of he's a wrestler without any other dimensions to his game, really. I mean, he doesn't strike, he doesn't have much of a submission game. He's not a fun fighter to watch. And Fischera is he came up as a regional champ. I'm trying to think of what organization now. And he's undefeated. He's got a really strong BJJ game. He and Colton Smith actually faced off in BJJ competition. Yeah, he has an LFC. He was a legacy fighting champ.
Colton Smith, he did grappling competitions?
Yeah.
Recently?
Recently enough that he and Fischera have faced off. I mean, maybe a couple of years ago.
No, and I wasn't saying that to be a dick or anything. To me, for him, I think that's kind of a respectable move. The last time he fought, I couldn't agree with you more, Zane. Good and bad, he was really a completely one-dimensional wrestler, although his striking has come along a little bit. But on the other hand, you know, for the notion that wrestling is the most powerful singular attribute to have, I mean, I thought Colton Smith really embodied that, because like it or not, he was a talented wrestler, and it was really tough for a lot of guys to stop his shot. So,
yeah.
Mr. Samman, what are you thinking?
You know, I kind of got to agree with Zane a little bit on this one. I always like to see, you know, I like to see the Ultimate Fighter guys succeed, but I don't think it's going to happen this time. I've met Colton; he's a real nice guy, and I think that if he made some improvements between this fight and the last couple fights that we've seen him in, then you know he could absolutely take it away. As you said, he's got some things that are hard to stop. But just looking at looking at Carlos's record and just his kind of fighting style right here, I think he'll probably have the grappling chops to defend what he needs to against Colton and probably get the win.
And a big part of this too is that I've watched Fischera fight a bit on the regional scene, and he's very much, I mean, in that sort of way that a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys get when they really want to strike. I mean, he's just kind of an all-out brawler. And if Colton Smith were really had a really decent, strong, stable defensive striking game, that would be problematic, but he doesn't really. And so Fischera he throws a lot of kicks, he throws a lot of punches, he's aggressive, and he'll just get in there over and over again and pressure him the whole fight. And I think that really, that'll be really good for him.
All right, so that's going to move us up to the main card on Fox Sports 1. 10 o'clock Eastern start time. First up, kind of a long-awaited debut, Joe Ellenberger, Jakey's brother, versus James, and I'm going to go with Muntasri for his last name pronunciation. Feel free to correct me, Zane. What's your thoughts here?
I just go with the Moonwalker because that's his nickname, I believe.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ellenberger has had 6 opponents before making his UFC debut. That's kind of hell. And of all of them, Muntasri is probably the guy most likely to beat him. He trains out of Black House, so he's got a lot of good training partners, a good camp there. He's a former U.S. national team Taekwondo member, and so he's got a really high output kicking game, which he's augmented lately with a lot better boxing and a lot more stable, stronger boxing game. And big thing he's really showed is a pretty competent wrestling game, both in takedown defense and in offensive wrestling. He's got a good, powerful double leg that he likes to time in behind his strike. So he'll throw a kick and a couple of punches, and then he'll just shoot in right underneath it with a big power double. And so, I mean, it's one of those things where Ellenberger, he's got power. He's not a great striker. He just tends to throw one-off big shots from the outside. And If Muntasri were a less talented striker, I'd say that Ellenberger had a pretty good chance of taking it just with his wrestling and top control and his power punching. But Muntasri's got a pretty capable striking game, and he's probably got the grappling chops to stop a lot of Ellenberger's wrestling.
Before we go on to Josh, it seems that guys who have a lot of traditional, but I really mean like karate, taekwondo, shorin-ryu, stuff like that, when they come in, it's not that they don't have a lot of the flashy kicks that a lot of us are either hoping for or expecting, but they have an excellent semblance of stand-up mechanics on things that aren't always so pronounced, like footwork, timing, movement, pivoting, that kind of thing. It sounds like Mutasri's kind of got that kind of thing going for him, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, in a similar, I guess you'd say in like a similar way to like maybe what's his name, Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Not all of his technique is beautiful, although he's gotten better progressively, but he has such a good command of the cage and of the ring. He's obviously spent a lot of time fighting and training to fight, that his movement is much more efficient and his footwork is much more efficient. And a lot of guys who just kind of threw on gloves 3 years ago and started training, they don't have that. They don't have that same sense of comfort out there of, really knowing and feeling and seeming like they're at home in the cage. So I'd say that Muntasri in that way really has that going for him as somebody who's going to have trained in martial arts since he was like a kid.
And Mr. Samman, you going taekwondo or?
Nah, I'm not going taekwondo. I'm going to go the other way around. And just like, I mean, Zane was talking a little bit at the end there about just the comfort level of Moonwalker, and clearly he's got a whole lot of a combat sport experience. But I mean, Ellenberger he's not new to any of this shit. He's 14-1 as a pro. He's watched his brother fight in main events. He's been in the UFC crowds. He knows how loud that shit gets. I don't think any of this is going to be new to him. He's going to have his brother in his corner, I imagine. I think that's going to be a big confidence booster. And I think that overall this is a narrative that the UFC wants to see as a successful pair of brothers in the UFC, beating people together and maybe hopefully fighting on the same cards and stuff like that should they choose to. I think this is a situation where they may not have wanted to get him somebody so tough for his first fight, but they didn't really have a choice. This is like Zane said, this was the sixth, his sixth opponent. I mean, we've just been reading about this stuff since he got announced as signing to the UFC. Everybody's just been pulling out and getting injured and all sorts of stuff. So, it may have, for a lesser fighter, some guy with less experience, less than 15 fights, it may have shook him up, all the opponent changes, but I think he'll adapt just fine. I think Joe will win.
So I'm guessing. Remind me to come back and get you, because I'm guessing the casual fan and maybe even some of the more, I guess, immersed fans might not be super familiar with Joe Ellenberger, but I imagine they are with Jake. So either of you guys can take this. For those that don't know a lot about Joe, compare and contrast his style with Jake's. What should we expect here?
I'll jump in on this just because it kind of gets to what I was about to say anyway. So a couple of things to know. First, that also factor into this. Not only while Muntasri's coming in on short notice, which definitely sucks for him a little. Joe Ellenberger, I believe, hasn't fought since 2012, so he's had a real long layoff to deal with. But getting it down to who he is, one of the other things worth mentioning is I believe he has not long ago was diagnosed with like a degenerative bone marrow disease.
Yeah.
And that actually was something that he was diagnosed with in the middle of his fighting career. So there is some less than stellar footage out there of him like pre-diagnosis, but when he was still dealing with the symptoms of it because he didn't know what he had. Where you can see him in a couple fights where you're just like, oh, really, this guy? I mean, and that kind of sucks for him. He's still, he was able to win fights and do well, but not always look like he was really like he would tire really easily and things like that. So, I mean, since then he's getting treatment, but those are a couple things to factor in. Otherwise, he's fraternal twin to Joe, so, same age, not the same structure. He's smaller, a little scrappier. I would say
similar wrestling pedigree?
I would say his wrestling, I don't know about pedigree, but he's a little more technical but less powerful, I'd say. I mean, it's less explosive. It's more get in on the hips and chain takedown attempts, single, double, switching angles, things like that. And but otherwise, it's a very similar like sit on the outside, wing big single punches, shoot in underneath kind of style.
Anything to add there, Josh?
No, I think we summed it up.
All right, let me throw it back your way on the next matchup here. Clint Hester versus Antonio Braga Netto. I get the feeling you're leaning Netto here, yeah?
Is that the feeling you're getting?
No.
If Netto wins, if he happens to get past my boy Clint, that's who I want next. I don't think it'll happen. Clint's been on a good little tear lately. This is going to be really, I think I'll put it this way. I think stylistically this is about as bad as it gets for Clint at this point in his career, and I still think that he succeeds. I think eventually he'll plug up any holes that he has in his grappling game, but I don't think that Antonio is going to be the one to expose any of them if they are there still. So I'm going to go with Clint, and I'm going to go ahead and say that if it's not Clint, then I'd like to fight Netto next.
I got excited. I actually thought you were going to say something cooler and more relevant, like I'll come on the next show with a funny hat or I'll have a mustache. But I guess if a UFC fight, you think that's higher priority. But while we got someone like you who's so familiar with Clint, kind of give us your breakdown of him real quick. Like walk us through what he's good at, what some of the holes he's trying to patch up, and what, if anything, he's been working to improve.
Well, I mean, obviously everybody looks at Clint and he's just he sort of fits that stereotype of a really athletic, explosive black guy, and that's obvious to see. He carries his weight up in his upper body, but he's still explosive, still fast. But the thing that I was always impressed about most with Clint is while we were on the show, Clint never really had a jiu-jitsu instructor, not much of one for most of his career. He worked with a boxing coach, and while we were on the show, while we had Frank Mir and Ricky Lundell and guys, going over techniques, Clint would just pick it up like that. Like anything you taught Clint, he just has, he transfers it over well. He'll rep it a few times, and then he'll put it in his arsenal, and he'll surprise you with it one day. And that's something that I always liked and admired about him. So as long as he's got some good grapplers around him right now, he comes down and trains with us all the time. But since I was injured for this last camp, he didn't spend much time at MMA Masters. But I mean, he comes down and I mean he bangs with the best of us, and he's got he's got a good tough chin, and he hits hard as hell. So I think he'll catch him. I think he'll catch Netto on the chin.
Obviously, the power of his striking stands out, and I can't remember which fight it was. It might have been his first official.
It was his first one. You're talking about that standing elbow that he caught on Bristol Maroon Day, or Bristol. It was Bristol, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of trippy, though. How did you know I was talking specifically about the standing elbow?
Because Clint and I talk about that all the time. We're like, hey, Clint, remember that time you got fucked out of $50,000 for the knockout of the night bonus? Travis Brown's over here just 12-6 and Bigfoot Silva in the back of the neck and getting 50 grand for it, and Clint's pulling off this just beautiful Chris Weidman, Mark Munoz looking elbow, just even better. I mean, it was one elbow strike that just knocked him the fuck out, and he didn't get paid for it. And we always joke with him about that, but I think the UFC still owes him a little bit from it.
Well, that stood out because I had a little bit before that written a big article on how I think standing Muay Thai elbows are really underutilized in MMA, and I thought he used it at the perfect
time. It was a third round. I mean, it was the third round. I mean, the fight up to that point, I think, was probably 1-1, maybe 2-0 for Clint, but it didn't look like it was going to end in any spectacular fashion. It was one of those fights where everyone had kind of sat back down in their seats by then, kind of just waited for the decision to come, and the next thing you know, Clint's coming with a elbow from left field, so it was exciting.
Yeah, that was a thing of beauty. All right, Zane, chime in on this. Hester versus Netto at the risk of offending Josh Samman.
Yeah, pass.
So he's saying Netto. So you tell me why you think Antonio's going to win.
Okay, well, I mean, the thing, so, and I don't want to,
No, you're good, you're good.
I don't want to speak out of class here, but,
I called this one, I'm just saying.
My big thing with Hester is really, like, I feel like he fights down to his opponent. If that makes sense.
His level?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a thing that fighters do sometimes, for sure.
Yeah. And, I mean, the big reasons are that his output doesn't seem to be high enough in rounds. So even when he's got a big advantage, like against ends, he had a big advantage striking over ends. It's much more polished, much more power, much better technique. And yet he just kind of sat back and gave ends all the space and time ends needed to work with. And eventually, ends even landed a couple hard shots here and there.
He definitely caught him with a couple.
And he has this way of, I mean, it obviously didn't happen with Marunde. That was a thing of beauty. But against Andrews too, and against Andrews too, he just has this way, like, it feels like he's just letting his opponent stay in the fight and do as long as they need to. Yeah. And get things done, and not necessarily going out there and dominating when he has the skills to.
Yeah.
So while I think he's a much better striker than Antonio Braga Neto, I worry that he's just going to sit back and let Neto have time to attempt takedown after takedown after takedown and suck him into a ground game and to wrap him up and submit him. So, I mean, I don't think he's as much as he might be working on his jiu-jitsu, I don't think he's polished and nearly as polished as Braga Neto on the ground.
Yeah.
And I think if he doesn't either make Neto work hard enough to get tired, because I mean that's been a big one of the big ongoing problems with a lot of guys who come off the jiu-jitsu grappling circuit is not their cardio isn't always necessarily fantastic.
Yeah, that's always suspect. They're used to sitting there and winning on points or laying back and already being up by an advantage or whatever the case may be.
So if he can make Neto work for 2 rounds, then maybe he can really get a good opportunity, or if he can catch him really hard early and really pour it on him and be aggressive. But I kind of worry that he's just going to let Neto come in on him and search for takedowns, and Neto will get one and get a submission.
Well, I'll agree with you there that Clint's best bet is to come out early and be violent from the beginning. And I think that the more it's hard to say that the more the fight goes on, the more it favors Neto. But I think that if the fight is continuing to go on, it's because Neto is implementing his game plan. So it may come down to whose cardio is better in the third and second round.
Doesn't this matchup kind of encapsulate, at least I'll be interested in your guys' thoughts on this. Clint he's in a tough spot because his striking is, I mean, ferocious, and it's the big advantage is it's pleasurable to watch. I mean, after he threw that elbow, I remember thinking, man, I can't wait for this dude to sink his teeth into somebody else.
Yeah.
But with him being maybe a little more susceptible on the ground, isn't he always kind of facing the dilemma of being a little bit fearful or really having to judiciously pick his spots where he's going to plant his feet and load up power for fear of the takedown? Is that just me, or do you guys think that that's a tough spot for him to really maximize his striking? Because it seems like opponents keyed in on that.
And Clint and I have spoken about this before, and I'm not Clint's coach by any means, but one thing that he and I have talked about that I kind of rely on in my striking is I don't really put as much time and effort into doing takedown defense. We practice wrestling, obviously. You have to do wrestling, but the way that I kind of get past that potential block that you just said is I just work on my guard game, and that's something that Clint could do and could be really good at. Is he doesn't have to be this submission guy, he doesn't have to pull off a bunch of slick sweeps, but he's got strong hips and strong, he's just strong in general. So it's hard to hold a really powerful guy like that down. And if he can just, even if he gets taken down, make sure that he lands in guard and doesn't get his guard pass, even in half guard, get his legs wrapped around him, take a breather, get back up, and then get back to work. Like we all know how Clint can work, then I think that may be the ticket here. I think he's going to have to at least defend a few takedowns or get up a few times maybe before he finds success if he doesn't catch him in that first couple exchanges, but I'm confident that he can do it.
So to be more specific, it sounds like, I'll come back to Zane, he's specifically working on his defensive guard when you say that, correct?
If I was Clint's coach, that's what I'd be telling him to do. I don't know what he's been doing this training camp.
And just curious, when you say defensive guard, are we talking like a lot of like elevating of the hips, like half butterfly or butterfly?
Like I said, it's a little bit different for both Clint and I. I kind of grew up around more jiu-jitsu, so I find comfort in the fact that I can be taken down and uncomfortable off my back because I have good sweeps, I have decent submissions. And I'm not one of those guys that's gonna just try to get right back up and start striking. I'll work for a little bit on bottom and see if there's anything you're going to give me. But Clint, I think, would be better suited to just get back up. Not, he's he's not late in his career, but he's not early in his career, and to learn all the intricacies and get the muscle memory down of setting up those submissions, and there's a lot more that goes into submissions and sweeps than there is into fucking hulking your way up and just using the cage, you know, and that's something that Clint can do pretty easily.
I got you. Zane, did you want to chime in on that at all?
The other thing I would say to go into that too, with my not being terribly worried about that, and you know, no offense to the UFC middleweight sitting across from me, but UFC's middleweight division isn't terribly deep on really like powerful wrestlers.
Yeah,
It's just not.
yeah,
There are not a ton of really, you know, and I'm not talking like at the top 10 because you could be like, oh well, Chris Weidman's a great wrestler rather, or you know whatever. It's like, well yeah, sure, he's the champ. You know, I mean, you're gonna fight the champ tomorrow? Probably not. Maybe 5 years from now or 2 years from now, but the division itself isn't big on guys who are searching for takedown after takedown after takedown. So I mean, like against Ends didn't show anything even close to a really powerful takedown against Hester. Even once that I can remember. I mean, he may have shot a couple times,
right?
but they were weakened from the outside. I mean, we're not talking about a division where you've got, like welterweight or something, where you're talking about a whole bunch of guys who are just going to go blast double after blast double.
Yeah, and I think the smaller weights you go, the more you see wrestlers and stuff, because I mean that's just a function of bigger athletes going to other sports, and wrestling is one of those sports growing up where they have weight classes, so it doesn't matter how much you weigh, you're still going to be able to find success if you're a talented athlete. So.
All right, cool. So let's move on. We spent a little extra time on that. We wanted to give Mr. Hester, Josh's boy, some extra love and attention there.
Appreciate that. My next one too. The next one's my teammate Ricardo Lamas and this other Nova and Yao victim that he's about to run through.
Okay, I can get through this a little easier then. Is Hakon Diaz your teammate? Because
take it away, Josh.
He's not my teammate, but I would say arguably that Nova and Yao is the most successful gym in the world right now. Anyway, obviously Barral just got beat, but for a long time they had two champs at the top, and you know that anybody that's coming from their camp is going to be talented. They're going to have hard training partners. My last potential opponent, Kaio, was training there, and we knew we had a tough fight on our hands. So I think it's not something to be overlooked. Just because he's unranked doesn't mean anything. He's 21-2, and that's a damn good record. But Rick Lamas is he's coming off a world title fight. He's coming off a world title fight for a reason, and that's because he was the #1 contender, and he is I think in the top 5, and he's ranked #3 right now. I'm looking at, and it's going to show on Saturday. I think Cochran is going to get his 3rd loss, and hopefully it's a finish. But I think that I'm real confident in Ricardo winning.
So again, because we got you on here, before I go to Zane, a couple questions. I thought Lamas trained somewhere out of Chicago, like maybe a year or so ago. Is he in between?
No, he lives in Chicago. I think he's got his own gym going on in Chicago, and just like the last situation with Clint, I haven't been in the gym for the last couple months. I've been injured, so I haven't seen a whole lot of Rick's training camp. But when I do see him train, he's always down about 6 or 7 weeks before the fight starts, and he'll come and he'll spend all his time with us in Miami, and he's got family that lives down here, and him and. When he gets in the gym and he gets in the cage, he comes to train. He trains hard, and he's a good addition to the gym. Great addition to the gym. So we're always happy when he comes down from Chicago.
I'm just curious on how, if any, like unorthodox, how much. Where I'm getting this from is when he fought Cub, he threw a capoeira kid. I think it was a Martello kid.
Yeah,
that surprised me because usually he's pretty straightforward, transitioning between boxing and wrestling and a big-time grinder. So is that like an anomaly in his game, or does he have some unique tricks up his sleeve?
No, and I think that he may not have been too comfortable throwing it against Aldo because Aldo is Aldo, but our other coach, I mentioned Sensei Daniel Valverde is Master Caesar, and he's a capoeira grandmaster in Brazil, and he's just so he's got these motherfuckers spinning all around the gym down here some days, dude. They do some awesome shit, and I'm just gonna punch and kick, and they're so you probably won't see a whole lot that stuff for me. But there are days where I'll walk in the gym and you know, Ricardo and Baboon will be doing flying, spinning, bicycle kicks and all sorts of shit. So sometimes they do it for fun, and I think that if they get the opportunity in the fight, they may throw some crazy shit. But I wouldn't rule it out. No, I wouldn't say it's an anomaly. I'd say that you'll see that from MMA Masters guys sometimes.
All right, and last one real quick. Having intimate knowledge of Ricardo, what would you say his top 3 attributes are? Doesn't necessarily have to be skills like boxing or wrestling. Can be heart, tenacity, whatever. His top 3, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say heart's a big one, you know, and then also an ability to adapt as well. I've seen him and Baboon go at it. For those who don't know who Baboon is, he's Luis Palomino. He fights in WSOF, and he's, in my opinion, one of the best 155ers in the world. So him and Ricardo are they're training partners. They're buddies. When Ricardo comes to town, they're inseparable. And I've seen some rounds maybe where Baboon will catch him with a certain thing, and Ricardo will go back and he'll think about it in between the rounds, and he'll come back out, and Baboon will try the same thing because he'll do it until you find an answer for it. And when I'm watching Baboon's rounds when he spars with everybody else, it takes everyone else a little bit longer than it takes Ricardo. Ricardo, Rick will figure it out pretty quickly within the fight. He also has a lot of combat sport experience. Fought in WEC, wrestled his whole life, so he knows how to make the adjustments at anything that anybody throws at him.
Is he still sporting the rat tail, or have we moved on? Just curious.
I don't think we've
wrong.
moved on. No, I think the rat tail's here to stay.
Still rocking it? Hell yeah,
If I had to guess.
All right, Zane, sorry to keep you silent for that long. So your thoughts on this matchup, and once again, will you be offending Josh Samman, this teammate?
Oh, no, I think I can get away without doing that for now. But, I'm happy in my role in second banana heaven here, so, whatever. But Hakon Diaz, I mean, I feel bad for him because I would say that Diaz is probably a top 15 talent in the featherweight division, maybe close to it. But he basically got, he basically ran into the same problems against Nick Lentz that 95% of the other featherweights in the world are going to run into, which is that Lentz is an incredibly good pressure fighter, and it usually takes two and a half rounds for fighters to figure out just how to beat him. I mean, Lentz loses like the last half of the last round of every fight he's in, it seems like. And he did so against Diaz too. All of a sudden, in like the last half of round 3, Diaz was just like, "Oh yeah, no way I can beat this guy," and then he started pouring it on him, and then lost. But because he beat Yuri Alcantara, and Alcantara is no joke. I mean, Alcantara's top 5 or close to it.
I was surprised by that. I was surprised by that outcome.
I mean, Alcantara's at the very least, he's knocking on the door of the top 5 at bantamweight. And Diaz is good, and he's a top talent at featherweight, but this is not the way to show that. I mean, I think he's going to get beat up by Lamas, and I expect that Lamas is probably going to be looking for blood after that fight with Aldo.
Yeah.
I would expect that he's going to be really mad that that fight went as poorly as it did, and that from so much of it, he was basically just ineffective. And he's going to want to hurt Diaz, and Diaz is a good wrestler, and he's a capable kickboxer, but he's basically strongest where Lamas is strongest, and Lamas is just better there.
So part of the intrigue for me, at least in this fight, is that at least I pictured Diaz coming out and putting his head down and going right after Lamas, because he's usually a real aggressive, if not consistently assertive fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of anyone. I can think of certain strikers who maybe tried to put it on Ricardo Lamas, but I can't think of anyone who physically wanted to get right in his grill, get in contact range, and try to take him down. First of all, has there been anyone that has really gone after him aggressively like that either of you guys can think of?
No, not that I can. I mean, besides Aldo, I think I'm trying to think who the last person to even beat Rick before that was.
Yuri Alcantara. Actually.
No, well, we're talking about. Are you talking about Lamas?
Yeah.
Let's see. It was Coke. Am I right there?
No, to beat Lamas, it was Yuri Alcantara.
Oh yeah. I'm just saying any opponent that Lamas has faced, even Aldo, was pretty respectful. Aldo didn't just come at him and throw his shit at him. I mean, he respected Ricardo and the fact that he could change levels and he's got big power in his hands. And I guess what I'm getting at here is I think Diaz is just going to, go right after Lamas based on, the way he's fought previously. And number one, I think that's going to be good because it's just going to make for a good fight. I mean, I think Ricardo's power and the fact that he can throw hands or change levels on him is going to make that a tough strategy. But I guess just to be fair on the other side, I can't think of anyone who's really come dead ahead and just tried to,
I have trouble thinking that there hasn't been anyone because he's fought a lot of really, really aggressive fighters. So there
I'm
have
going from memory here, so.
but I can't remember. I mean, he fought Cub Swanson, he fought Matt Grice, he fought Dave Jansen, he fought Danny Castillo, Yuri Alcantara. All these guys are really aggressive, and so, like I say, I can't.
Castillo's the only guy on that list I can think of, though, that would have tried to, close range.
That would have tried to bull through him.
Right.
Castillo might be the one, but I don't remember that fight for the life of me. So.
Well, you're supposed to be the one who knows what the hell's going on here, Zim.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm failing.
All right. Either way, let's move on here. Andrew Craig. We're halfway through the main card on Fox Sports 1. Andrew Craig and Cesar Ferra / Mutante, or they say it some other weird way.
Yeah, probably like Mutante or something.
Mutante. There was a CH in there. All right, Zane, go ahead. Break this shit down.
This is kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about middleweight not having a lot of really big skill players or really like aggressive, especially wrestlers. But I mean, even just guys who are kind of floating around in the middle of the division. I mean, Ferra and Craig are both decent, solid fighters, but they're not people that I have pegged as like, oh man, this guy's a rising star in the division. He's on his way straight to the top. And so they're both kind of treading water, and this is kind of, I mean, this is a fight. This is sort of a fight to see who keeps treading water and who sinks. Because Ferra had a terrible performance against CB Dollaway, and CB Dollaway's looked great lately, but I mean, you can't. It's a combination of CB Dollaway looking great and Ferra just getting totally knocked out by, I mean, not getting anything together. He just came out, took a couple swings at him, and got KO'd. There's no good big positive to take away from that. And then Craig has been, he started out strong especially with that performance over Rafael Natal, where Natal was just kind of beating him up for a round and a half, and he just came out of nowhere with that head kick and cracked him. But he took a tough loss to Hani Marks and a tough loss to Luke Barnett and a tough decision with Chris Lieben, who at that point in Chris Lieben's career was well past the Chris Lieben we all know and love. And so I got to say that I think Ferra he tends to get stuck in modes where he's either striking or he's grappling, and he's not the best striker in the world, and he's not like his grappling good, but it's not like world class. He's just a decent grappler. But I think he's big enough and strong enough, and I think that he's got enough of the chops that he'll get Craig down and just wear on him and make this a tough fight, and I expect him to take a decision.
I don't know if inconsistent is the right word, but would you say that, and it's mostly with Craig, would you say that he's shown shades of both, goods and bads, sometimes in the same fight or in the same round?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I think Patrick Wyman said it in to preview our staff picks. He was talking about the fact that Craig's a really great athlete, but he's not, he doesn't have the best technique in the world. So a lot of times you see, you see these flashes of him being really great, where he looks like this great athlete. He throws these snapping head kicks, and he moves really well and stuff like that. But other times, that lack of technique, especially when he gets into we lost you. Especially when he gets into an open exchange or something, that lack of technique starts to show. I mean, especially against Chris Lieben. Lieben just sort of waded in on him and threw hands and caught him.
All right, so that was kind of funny because right when I flipped it over to you, my phone went off and I had a text from Josh, and I'm like, why the fuck is Josh texting me during the middle of the show? And he's like, damn, I lost. I'll be right back on. So we might have been able to pull that off. But either way, welcome back, sir. How are you?
You missed me picking Ferra, if you missed it at all.
Yeah, we're on Andrew Craig and Cesar Ferra, Mutante.
Any relation to the other Ferra on the card?
No.
No, yeah, fairly common
I think so. You picked Caesar, huh?
Yep.
I think Andrew's going to win this one. I think both these guys were, if I remember correctly, both of them are coming off knockout losses.
Uh, Craig's was a submission, but I think he got hit hard before he got
No,
submitted.
it was Luke. Luke clocked his chin, and then what he follow up and get him in a guillotine or a rear naked or something.
Yeah, rear naked choke.
Man, I think Andrew's going to win. This is another fight that I'd probably like the winner of, but I don't think the UFC would give me. I think they're almost at the co-main event of a fight. They're a little bit higher than me on the middleweight roster, but I think that Andrew's loss to Luke was more of a testament to Luke's ability, and I think that Caesar's loss to CB was more of Caesar getting exposed rather than the other way around. So if that makes sense, So I think Andrew is probably the better fighter, and I think he'll win.
That is really fascinating because I see Dalloway as like a top 10 fighter at his peak right now, and Barnett's kind of just a guy in the division. I mean, he's a good fighter, but like he hasn't done anything. I mean, he's won a couple fights, but he's not been on any great.
But I mean, Sean Strickland, really beat up Bubba McDaniel, and Luke arguably beat Sean. So Luke should be 4-0 in the UFC right now, which is nothing to scoff at, So
No, it's not.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, he hasn't been on a super incredible tear, but CB, I agree. CB's probably at his peak right now. He's made a lot of improvements, and I'd like to see what he does in his next fight. But I think Luke should be 4-0 right now, and so I see Andrew's loss to him as a little bit less meaningful.
All right, so we're moving on to the co-main of the Fox Sports 1 main card. Kelvin Gastelum, tough winner, versus Nicholas Musoke. Josh, since you left us for a while, what are your thoughts here?
Kelvin, man. Kelvin all day. I think that, I was just freaking floored when I went back and when I was looking over this card and I saw that Kelvin was ranked at number 11, which I'm not surprised at. That's awesome. I mean, he just beat Rick Story, which was a really tough fight, and Rick dropped Kelvin in that fight. Kelvin got right back up and kept fighting like a veteran. Obviously, I want to see everybody from the Ultimate Fighter 17 succeed, but especially I always want to see guys that I fight succeed. Kevin Casey's been on an awesome tear. He just got re-signed with the UFC. Everybody that you fight, you want to see win, because that means that you fought tougher opponents and you have a stronger strength of opponents. So for I'm rooting for Kelvin all the way, and it means I didn't shit the bed that one day in the Ultimate Fighter last day. And that means that one thing about Kelvin that I really really liked is he's just an uber competitor, man. He's such a nice kid outside the cage, but when it's fight day and it's fight time, he's got a fucking look in his eyes that that all fighters get when they're getting ready to compete. He's definitely whatever that X factor is, he's got it. He don't want to lose at all.
So is he not one of the most unique Ultimate Fighter winners in the fact that even though he ended up winning, all the excitement and hype was around Uriah Hall, Kelvin ended up winning, and then he's continued to show like crazy, almost unfathomable improvements each time out. But for some reason, and again, it's me kind of maybe gauging how the fans are gauging things, but to me it seems like he continually is kind of overlooked, but let's say it this way, he continually overperforms to what he's expected, but he's still like people maybe still just aren't giving him the credit, or he's yet to break through from the public's point of view. Is that just me, or
it's sort of like it's kind of it's just a weird situation. I mean, you got to think of it. I mean, this is the first time probably that Kevin hasn't been the underdog in like 7, 8 fights. I mean, the very first fight on the Ultimate Fighter, he fought a guy who was 10-1. His name escapes me. And then after that, he fought Bubba, he fought Colin, he fought me, and then he fought Uriah, and then he fought. I think he was supposed to fight Paul Tiago. I'm not sure if that fight ever happened, but he's had a few fights since then. I mean, every single fight that he's in, he's pretty much supposed to lose. And then finally, they're like, all right, this kid's for real. They slap a number 11 ranking on him, and now it's his job to live up to that hype that he's created for himself. I mean, it may seem like a crazy long shot of a comparison, but stylistically, who Kelvin reminds me of the most and people may laugh, but I think it's Daniel Cormier, and just the fact that he's got really excellent low center of gravity, really great wrestling, really strong, crisp boxing. I've had those punches coming at my face before, and I didn't want to get hit by them, so obviously Daniel Cormier is quite a tall order to live up to, but stylistically, I think that Kelvin is almost the perfect wrestle boxer, and I think that should hopefully take him to a championship in the next couple of years.
All right, Zane, what do you think? You giving Musoke a shot here?
No, and not because Musoke is a bad fighter, but unfortunately for him, while he's a really good fighter, he has terrible striking defense. And
but good offensive striking, right? Pretty decent offensive striking.
He's got swarming offensive striking. He's aggressive, which when coupled with really bad defense is not necessarily a great thing. But he's been kind of helped in that he fought a couple of guys who are also what I like to think of as like mode fighters who get stuck either doing one thing or another. Like Alessio Sakara, he's either he can wrestle a little, or he can grapple a little, but 90% of the time he's just stuck in boxing mode, and he's just going to box. And then he'll switch to wrestling, then he'll go back to boxing, and then he'll switch to wrestling. And Viscardi Andrade is a really good example of that. Quality grappler, quality striker with a lot of power, doesn't chain them together at all. And so Musoke kind of got, he got hit hard, and then Andrade tried to swarm him and couldn't, and then Musoke was able to rally and pull it together and make a good fight out of it. And so, but I think Gastelum doesn't strike me that way. I mean, his game is really fluid. He moves really fluidly between disciplines. He hits like a truck. So quite frankly, I think that he's going to catch him early and probably put him out early and not let him off the hook the way that Sakara and Andrade did.
All right, moving up on now to the main event. Cub Swanson versus Jeremy Stephens. Before you guys launch into your pick on here, I guess just give me your thoughts on Stephens' transition, because obviously it's been phenomenal, and I think he's much better suited to featherweight. I guess, so Josh, let me throw it to you. Before you break down this matchup and give me your thoughts, what do you think on Stephens' drop down to 145?
I gotta share just at the risk of a little bit of privacy. I met Jeremy Stephens one time at a few months ago. It was before his last fight at like a Fight Pass thing that they had set up for us, and I didn't know Stephens. I wasn't I didn't dislike him, but I wasn't particularly I didn't like follow him in every fight. I wasn't a giant Jeremy Stephens fan, but I am now. He really struck me as a way different in person than the kind of the personality that he exudes on the TV. He was really nice, really polite, really witty guy. And this was like 9 or 10 weeks before his last fight, and we went out to dinner, and he didn't have a sip of alcohol, a thing to drink. He was just really focused, really excited about his next fight, and so I'm not sure if that's something that's newfound that he has, that he really decided to dedicate himself, or maybe rededicate himself, make a drop down in a weight class, and try to make a run at the title. But I think that he is really focused, and that's one thing that can lead to success in fights and in a fighting career. I don't know Cub. I've never met him, anything like that, so I can't say anything like that. Jeremy Stephens has said in an interview that he thinks he deserves a title shot after this win. I'm not sure that that's quite the case. While it probably may be the case for Cub if he wins, I think Jeremy would probably have to win one more after this, but I would be absolutely thrilled to see Jeremy Stephens in a title fight.
Yeah, and I agree. It's for, I guess, Zane, do you know if there's a size difference between these two?
Are we getting in on the size difference thing now?
Yeah.
Swanson's 5'7", and Stephens is 5'9".
Yeah.
So somehow Swanson's shorter, which in my mind doesn't make sense. But
I'm not sure that's accurate. I think if anything, Cubs probably make. I mean the UFC.com in all of its glory, sometimes the heights are not always.
Well, I'll admit I don't use UFC.com for anything ever.
Or SureDog.com or any of the other super.
Yeah, all the MMA databases are variously flawed.
I got to
Yeah.
say though, just based on my memory, usually I'm with you guys, but on this one, ever since Stevens has dropped down to featherweight, I've noticed like, damn, I did not expect him to be that tall. And maybe now that I got that ingrained in my head, I did imagine, now that he's going to be, hefty. I don't know how much he's going to put back on afterwards, but he's going to have 2 inches of height, probably going to have a little bit of reach. And I think
That doesn't. Now you're like. Let's see, his reach is listed at 71, because that's the thing. Cub Swanson does have really long arms. No, he will have an inch of reach. Who knows? I don't
so
even
that's
know
still
when.
not that much. And actually, I started when I was really hardcore. I started to keep my own database for reach length because that's the
Mhm.
one thing I always wanted to know and I couldn't find anywhere. But so either way, mild, I guess size advantage for Stevens. But Zane, break down this matchup. What are you thinking here?
Uh,
Kind
I
of
don't know. I
power
think
versus finesse. Am I right?
so the well, I don't know. Cub Swanson's never lacked for power.
Uh,
Well, I mean, he has it, but to me, I mean, Stevens is going to
Okay, I
come
mean,
in.
it's not dolly whop and put you to
one,
sleep
two,
power,
three,
Yeah.
four. I mean, four of his last five wins have been knockouts. I mean, we're not talking
Yeah, but
about somebody who. I
Yeah,
mean,
but TKOs,
well,
TKOs.
yeah, and
but the way that they keep
Split hairs. Yeah,
the
well,
way they
you know what
keep
I'm saying, though, right?
yeah.
knockouts and TKO records is really suspect. Like that's, and for Stevens, for all the power he's supposed to have, he has one knockout since 2011. You know,
Well, let me rephrase that question. Stevens is probably going to have a little bit of a predictable strategy because that's what he always does. He's going to look to close range and form together pretty basic, nothing fancy boxing combinations. He doesn't really kick that much anymore. He's gone to a boxing heavy
Stevens,
strategy. Yeah, Jeremy?
like the
Stevens?
guy who just knocked out Ronnie Jason with the head kick, doesn't
Yeah,
kick
but
much.
when was the last kick he threw besides that? I mean, if you're going
I
to
mean, his Darren Elkins
Jesus.
fight, I remember him kickboxing pretty consistently at range. Maybe I'm totally off on that, but
Well, and I could be too, but when he started to struggle with a lot of wrestlers at lightweight before he dropped down, he
well,
started to
okay.
go to more of a boxing centric strategy, and I think that was because his hand and body position and balance were more ideal to defend takedowns. So generally, usually, when Stevens is coming in throwing his things, it's usually punches. So let's say
Okay,
if you
what do
throw
I
some.
know? What do I know?
All right, let me just rephrase this. Hey Zane, Cub
Yeah.
Swanson, he's fighting Jeremy Stevens. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
All right, thanks. Thanks for letting me start that out there. But no, I think the big thing is I do think that Stevens is probably peaking in his career right now. I think he's probably hit like I mean, and it's a weird thing where guys just suddenly they hit this groove and they're performing better than they have at any point. And I think that's kind of where we are with Stevens. I mean, he seems really calm. He seems really in control. He seems to be dictating range really well in fights now. Um, and
So what's your
the
pick?
thing, my pick is Cub Swanson. I think
Yeah.
Cub Swanson's got a more diverse offense, and the thing I really worry about with Stevens is, and it's something that's somewhat of a holdover from his career, is that when he gets hit hard, he kind of freezes up for like 10 or 15 seconds, where he will just kind of shell up when he gets hit hard. And
Yeah.
Swanson's the kind of guy who hits with enough power and enough consistency that he'll just jump on him for that.
Well, I'd argue that that's exactly how Cub gets his TKOs is by cracking somebody one time, getting him to cover up so that he can open up, be a little bit more creative, and hit him with some things that they're not going to see coming. But I think he's probably seen a good bit of everything anybody can give him. I don't think Cub's going to give him anything that he hasn't seen before. So I don't think Cub's a bad pick. Maybe I'm just picking personally here.
Which you should. You should. You know Stevens. I mean, he's your friend. I'm not going to, like, if I know a fighter is my friend, I'm not going to be like, oh, no, that guy, he's garbage.
Well, I'd say if anyone can throw, I mean, Cub is one of the most dynamic fighters I can think of. I mean, Cub throws capoeira. When he's in the clinch,
He's creative for sure. Yeah.
Real creative, top-notch judo, and he can drop, change levels for traditional like singles and doubles. His boxing has really come along really, really well. I mean, he was always a good boxer, but now, like you guys are saying, he sets everything up really well, and if he stings you once, he either records that back in the memory bank and comes back, or he'll hit a different angle. And
Yeah.
he's a real intelligent volume puncher. So I think there's very few guys that can. And he's always been like a BJJ black belt forever. So that I think is a big deal. But the reason that I brought up the size thing is, Cub has good takedown defense, but he's not like a power guy, where Stevens is a pretty big boy. His offensive wrestling has really come along. I mean, this is a dude who did he not beat Anthony Pettis? I mean, I remember it was a split, but he beat Pettis. Am I making that up? I'm going from memory here.
I don't remember.
He lost Anthony Pettis by split in a fight that many people thought he won.
Yeah, either way, he went the distance, yeah.
Yeah, either way, I mean, that speaks a lot about his caliber now that Pettis has come through as the number one guy. So I can kind of see advantages both ways. Cub's one of my favorite fighters, man. He's the kind of guy who has, like BJ Penn and the Diaz brothers, all kinds of real top-notch technique, but he goes in there like a gunslinger. I mean, he fights like a street fighter. So I think you definitely have to respect that. I'm really curious if Stevens even tries to rely on any offensive wrestling here. I can see that going a million different ways. I can see him not even trying. Go ahead, Josh.
I agree with you. I don't know. And I was going to say that when you mentioned Cubs takedown defense. I mean, I don't know. If I was Jeremy, I probably wouldn't be going for the takedown here. Who knows what he's going to do? But just coming from my point of view, I think he'll be looking for for the big shots and like you said, getting inside, stringing together something that doesn't have to be real complicated. It can be pretty basic. A lot of basic striking combinations work sometimes if you got that kind of power that Jeremy has behind him. So you're seeing two guys right here, sort of on a career resurgence. In a main event, in a 5-round main event of a UFC fight, which is a huge accomplishment. So I think this one, hopefully, what I'd like to see and what the fans all want to see is a fight to just see who really wants it more. And you got these two guys who have a really great capacity for violence, and they both have pretty decent chins as well. So hopefully we get everything that this fight could be and more. That's the way I see it going. Hopefully.
Yeah. Apparently, just recently, Cub Swanson got feeling back in his face, so maybe that'll. He apparently hasn't had it for years.
From Aldo, double.
I don't know. I remember seeing something from him. I think it was like a couple months ago, where he's like, just got feeling back in my face for the first time. Like, it's gonna suck to feel punches.
I would imagine that was from the Aldo fight. I think I remember reading something about him years ago losing feeling because of that. So.
So maybe that'll affect the fight too somehow. Maybe he'll get hit and be like, "What is that?"
Like that's what a punch feels like. Yeah.
All right, so I wanted to kind of get in with some personal stuff on Josh, but why don't we wrap it up, and then Josh, you and I sometime in the near future we'll kind of do a one-on-one interview. I just got a bunch of stuff that I'll bullshit with you on. Is that cool? Thank you very much for coming on today. Always an honor to have you. Open door policy anytime you're interested. Anything you want to plug or self-promote or anything before we take off?
If you're in Florida, you guys got to come check out my organization, Combat Nights, a little amateur promotion I have that it's not little by any means, actually. We travel all around the state, Tallahassee, Orlando, Miami, and Jacksonville, and we're building up these young local fighters to hopefully get some of them in the UFC one day. As for me, myself, recovering from the hamstring surgery a few months ago. I'm feeling great. Started to work out again. I got a couple more steps in the whole process of 100% recovery, but I'm about 80% right now. I'm almost there, and I'm active again. And you heard it here first. I want to fight in September or October. I think September, maybe pushing it a little bit if I could get on that Japan card on September 21st, and that'd be a dream come true. But we gotta get a clearance letter from the doctor first, and that's the next step right now.
Gotcha. All right, so we'll stay in touch on that. Zane, self-promotion to close yourself off?
Nah, I got nothing to follow that. Yes. I have no call-outs to make, no future fights to book.
Yeah.
Follow me on Twitter, I suppose, if you must.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter too, please. I'm trying to get active, stay active on that.
What's your Twitter shit?
It's my name, Josh Samman.
Josh Samman. All right, next time I'll make sure I throw it to you first, Zane.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. Be like, yeah, here's the UFC fighter. What do you got going on in your life? Yeah, what do you?
I'm painting my house. Zane's painting his house. That's what he's.
That's right. I'm painting my house.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Zane, are you and I going to do the next Vivisection on the other Saturday card?
Yeah, I'm up for it if you are.
All right. Yeah. So we'll have to organize that for sometime tomorrow. But Thanks to you both. Everybody take care. Thanks for watching.
Peace.